I got this one.
Whoa. Are you serious?
Give me the fur.
Are you actually joking right now?
Give me the fur.
Fine. We're going to talk about this later.
Once upon a time, there was a woman named Dom who made poems for panels, which I thought was the bomb. So imagine my shock when dear Dom shared a secret that made her feel anxious and filled with much regret. Barb, she addressed me, because that's my Dom name. I'm sorry, but your panel, it will not be the same. While the others, presented by me, were in verse, yours will, well, please don't be terse. You see, I ran out of time, and I just couldn't do it. But it's you, Barb, so I know you'll completely get through it. Hurt and in shock, I lied through my teeth. Sure, Dom, I got this, though my rhymes may be brief. So without hesitation and without joke or jest, please allow me to introduce to you these 4 fabulous guests. Watchmaker, executive, collector, retail. These 4 fine gents are familiar with detail. Adam Craniotes is Red Bar's voice and its face. And as EIC of Revolution US, he has found a new space to share thoughts about watches, write words about time. And since I'm now on his payroll, I'll say I think he's sublime. The next speaker before you, Mr. Christoph Nisses, Business Development Officer at Siddiqui Holding, but he just has a nice face. He is French, he is kind, he is smart, dresses well. And if you don't like his shoes, you can all go to the Dubai Mall, because they have a lot of shoe stores there. Danny Goldberg and I, well, we're from the same town. I grew up knowing his store was the best store around. CEO and co-founder of the Watchbox brand, I'm sure Dubai is quite happy to have him here in this land. Last but not least is the man we should all know, who I'm positive is nervous, even debating whether to show. You see, last year in London at Horology Forum, I asked Stephen Forsey a question forgetting my decorum. But don't worry, Stephen, it's fine. No need to be on guard. For I promise this time, the questions won't be hard. I thank you, my hosts, for all that you've done to make Dubai Watch Week not just educational, but fun. For giving me the honor to sit on this stage so that together on Horology, we can all write a new page.
Bravo. Wow. Bravo.
Okay, if I hear what is this panel about one more time, what is hot potato? Nobody knows. This is going to be the fun of it. We're going to ask you, the audience, and actually it's going to be a little bit different because the lovely ladies with the mics are going to wait for me to see who raises their hand first. So it's going to kind of come down to me. Don't try to wave them down to get the next mic. Questions can be about anything except no politics, no religion, no sex, no alcohol. Other than that, it's going to be fun, I promise. I promise. You don't need those things to have
There's not
fun.
much left. Yeah, I'm leaving.
But you can ask anything. It doesn't have to be about watches. It can be about anything. You're not going to ask directly to a member of the panel. You're going to ask one member to ask another. So you may say, Danny, can you ask Adam Craniotes what his thoughts are on Invicta? And then Adam, if you know Adam's thoughts on Invicta, will either respond or he will hot potato the question to another member of the panel. Once we run out of members of the panel, because that person can also hot potato it, once we're down to the last one, like musical chairs, that person has to answer the question, or they deal with Dom, who is now furless and angry. So that's going to happen. Another way we can play it is you can get another audience member to ask one of these guys a question. So we'll say, Josh says, hey, Alex, remember that conversation we had last night about such and such? Why don't you ask Adam about that? And then Alex will have to actually ask the question to Adam. Again, hot potato, okay? We do a countdown, 3, 2, 1, hands go up. Guys, get creative, get fun. This is the last panel. This is how we're gonna end it, all right? 3, 2, 1.
Stephen, can you please ask Christoph, as Chief Business Development and Strategy Officer at Sidiri Holding, what would he do differently at Dubai Watch Week?
Well, Christoph, you're going lights down.
Okay.
What would you do differently for Dubai Watch Week?
I think looking at the feedback we have received so far from the audience, the visitors, the media, whoever has been participating to Dubai Watch Week, I wouldn't change many things because the feedback has been exceptionally positive. And I think as a true reflection of that positive feedback, I think we're in for a nice panel tonight to close the week. The week has been fun, and I think having a fun panel like the one we have now is a nice way to end up on a high spirit, what has been Dubai Watch Week. So congratulations to the marketing team and everyone at Sidiki Holding. I wouldn't change much about anything you did for Dubai Watch Week.
Okay.
The question was what you would change.
Apparently, your answer was not satisfactory.
So Adam, would you mind answering that question?
Oh, wow.
Well played!
Let me think about this one. You know, it's funny because I've had a lot of thoughts about this. And one of the things I was thinking was, you know, what would Danny do differently? Because I know he had a lot of opinions about this.
This isn't going well, is it?
No, it's going beautifully.
Position.
I was going to say.
What would I change? There's not a lot I would change. I think what I would change is I probably would replace Basel for Dubai Watch Week.
Yep.
Wow,
Good answer.
That's big.
So I think that if we figured out how to bring Basel here, and everybody would have a lot more fun, or at least Watches of Wonders maybe, I think that that would be, I wouldn't change anything about here. I think I would use here to change there.
Wow, good answer.
Strong. Yeah.
You are,
Yeah.
that was awesome. Okay, hands.
So Adam, I have a question for you to ask Mr. Forsey here. A recent phenomenon in the watch business, and as someone as Mr. Forsey's magnitude, a master watchmaker, creation of outrageous complications, outrageous pieces, all handmade. But a recent phenomenon is stainless steel sports watches with a blue dial and an integrated bracelet. Some in there we see as well. So I want to know Mr. Forsey's thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, Stephen, when are...
I'm going to see you outside.
Yeah. This is a serious question.
Okay, Adam, I'm all ears.
When are we, because it's not like you heard the question. So
I haven't heard the
You're
question.
just hearing it for the first time. When are you going to get around to making a proper steel sports watch with a blue dial and like 3 hands? Come on.
Well, there's, you know, I don't know what to say. You know, you've put me on the spot here because this is of course a certain territory, and I should be in a good place to field this one, shouldn't I?
One would think.
So I think I'm going to bounce it to Mr. Christoph here. Thank you.
All right, get to the bottom of this now.
Can the panel throw the question back to the audience?
No. But you have one member.
I have one more member, but
So when do you think that you know what do we
You'll
think
make us-
about?
I will attempt to answer and not throw the hot potato to you, Danny.
Danny, it's,
But
you
come to
have
the
answer.
rescue if I need.
Okay.
Without naming anyone, I think if so many brands are doing it, it must be a reflection of what the consumer might want. And in another panel, we talk about how now watches or brands are becoming influenced by fashion or become fashionable. So I think that the fact that there are so many brands doing the same thing is probably a reflection of that, and that it's fashionable to have an integrated steel bracelet on a steel case with a blue dial.
I'd like Adam to ask Barbara, what's the worst thing you've done at Dubai Watch Week ever?
Wow.
All right. So Barbara. I know this isn't your first rodeo.
Right.
And I know I've heard some stories. So I'm curious, what is the absolute worst thing that you have done at Dubai Watch Week?
God, the worst thing I've done.
Just one.
The worst, I mean, I know what it is.
Okay.
The worst thing I've done is hot potato that question to Stephen.
That's terrible.
So this is, well,
alone.
this is an interesting area where I don't know if there's much material to go on. What are we going to do with this? So it's the worst thing that Barbara's done at Dubai Watch Week. Make a guess.
You can take a guess.
The worst thing,
I mean-
I think the worst thing that Barbara thinks that she's done is to take the moderation position on this panel, actually, because she's right in the hot seat there.
Stephen, ask Danny, what's the best way of continuing these conversations when we all go home, back to our respective companies and careers, so that the next time we're at Dubai Watch Week, a lot of things have changed?
Well, good question.
It's heavy.
So, Danny.
You have to ask him. No, that's cheating.
Okay, so Danny,
you have
we've
to
got a
remember
question.
all the lengthiness that Ariel
I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
That's the trouble with
That's
Ariel. You know,
Are you going to be asking me this question? How provocative can we get with this answer? I think that much of the media has to decide who their customer is. Is the customer the collector, or is the customer the brand? If your customer is the brand, then you're a PR firm. If your customer is the consumer, then we can continue to have this conversation. But if the media that's supposed to be the policing media, meaning trade media, enthusiast media, usually to the best of their ability, they look out that the brands do the right thing. And I think in our case, too much power is in the hands of the brands that then put too much pressure on really good people, really good journalists, really good media that want to say their piece. The thing about this week, Dubai Week, this panel, is that we're allowed to speak our piece with friends. So I think that if we want to continue the conversation, I'll put that into the hands of the enthusiast press, because I'll never call it trade press. I had IW Magazine for a long time. I used to get in major fights with brands, making sure that they called us enthusiast press. But it's us enthusiast press that have to push Basel. We've got to push brands. We can't just say what they want us to say or write what they want us to write. We have to say our piece. And then the consumer will get to continue online. And they'll get to decide who they like and who they don't like. But I think that we can't be beholden to brands anymore, because they're not beholden to the enthusiast press that's here.
Can I clap? That was amazing. Okay, hands up.
Stephen, the man who did the handmade watch. Could you ask Adam if it would be okay if you Christmas presented his kids with a smartwatch?
Oh, and you have to ask the question.
yes. So, Adam, would it be okay if you'd Christmas gift your kids with a smartwatch?
Okay, for Lola, who's 10, no, because it's just too much money and I don't like spending it on her. I already spend too much on ballet lessons twice a week now. And she doesn't even want to be a ballerina. I asked her, I said, why are you doing it? Why not? Not a good answer. Paul? Probably not. And probably because I don't think it sends the right message. First of all, I want him to enjoy watches the way that I enjoy watches. Now, he's started with the Casios, the G-Shocks now, but he knows that when he turns 18, he gets my first good watch, which was a Rolex Submariner, because I think that's everybody's first good watch, unless he's a complete jerk, in which case I am welding an Invicta to his wrist, but that's like a whole other thing. So no, they're not getting smartwatches. Yeah.
Christoph, I want you to ask Stephen why he wasn't at your panel. And why? What was he doing?
Oh.
Stephen,
He's been here since the 11th of November.
why didn't you attend my previous panel and what were you doing?
Excellent question. Can I ask you when your panel was?
It was on Friday at 12 p.m.
Friday at 12. That's like 2 days ago. What was I doing? 12 at midnight, you mean?
No,
No.
12 p.m.
There's no panel at midnight.
12
p.m.
p.m. So midday.
midday.
Okay. I was it was probably we'd been doing some actually intensive market research with a very select group of figures from the watch industry, covering from the brands, actually, people right there building the watches, imagining them and creating them, through the vehicle, the wonderful media and all of you, a bunch of you, and with some collectors thrown in. And there may even have been one or two representatives from the Dubai Watch Week team there. And we were doing this intensive market research. So that kept us
Busy.
That kept us very busy. So after that, schedules were a little bit disjointed for a short while. But things then later returned to normal later on in the day. Thank you.
But you're sorry. But you're sorry, right?
Yeah, and we're terribly sorry about that. And of course, I will be catching up with Christoph on the content of this panel later, probably while we do more market research. Anyway.
Danny, I have a question for you to ask Christoph. The question is, when are we going to get toilets here?
Ooh. Christoph, when are we going to get toilets?
Thank you for asking the questions. So I'll go back to the first question of that panel. Actually, that might be something we need to change for Dubai
You're right.
Watch
That's
Week.
a good change.
It's to bring in a little bit more safe environment for toilets. And
Very nice.
thank you for asking and participating to the progress of Dubai Watch Week.
Next.
Adam, I'm going to have you ask Mr. Stephen, when it comes to Grupo Force, we obviously know they're one of the most expensive watches in the market. Very valuable, very expensive, big price tag. Now, when you have a project for the watch, how do you possibly decide the price? Do you, because of what we see and the amount of it, all the watches are expensive. And so, do you sit there and just make the watch and say, let's make it really expensive so people get really pissed off and no one can buy it? I mean, what happens? There's obviously a cost involved, but is it, in all seriousness, a cost and then you want to, obviously there's a profit margin, or is there, let's price it in this elite, super elite category that we want only a specific certain clientele for it? What is the balance between the costs involved, the profit, and then where you're trying to place the exact watch?
And you have to say all of that verbatim, by the way.
No, I think I've got it. So, yeah, Mr. Stephen. Grubel 4Z pricing. What gives? That was it, right?
I was
Got it.
hoping that I might
Word
be
for
able to
word.
field an answer shorter than the question, but that's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
You've kind of brought it together there. Well, on the series, thank you very much for the question. And it was on that list of ones I was hoping nobody was going to ask. But no, when we would Global 4C, we're creating things and innovating and inventing, and this is a costly exercise. So, in reality, all of our collectors support us, and that then goes back into more R&D and more research. That's the real side. But how do we actually do it? If you look at our GMT, if you imagine the specification for that timepiece, then you've got a mechanical hand-wound movement with hour minutes for your local time, small seconds, power reserve. You've got a second time zone with a little, with a changing facility there. You've got a globe and a day and night indication. So if you look at that as a specification, actually, and you were in a marketing-driven approach, you would never come up with what we came up with, And so we start from a completely different standpoint. We do consider what we would like the watch to do when it's built, but then we really go kind of out of the box and take it from a different angle and create what we really would like it to be like. And when it's built, when the first prototype is there, we don't know how much it's going to cost. It's when we build the first prototype, we cost that out, and we hope that we will be able to make X number of that watch, unless it's a unique edition where the caliber itself is specifically limited, and then we field it. And so that's quite a challenging exercise, because with the GMT, I mean, we can say it's a timepiece which is a little over $500,000 US dollars or Swiss francs. So if you'd done that specification, you would never have come up with that type of watch, because you would have imagined it was impossible to actually retail a watch for that level. That's the kind of serious response. But there is a thing that on the sort of more appropriate to this panel subject in terms of expensive. For me, a cup of coffee which is branded specifically is expensive, because honestly the coffee is quite similar. Okay, there can be differences, but a coffee for coffee from the same region of the world but branded differently is priced differently. For me, that's expensive, because you're paying for branding, which is then used to market that.
I'm going to add to this, if you don't mind.
Please
Is
do.
that allowed?
Thank you.
Adam,
Thank you. You
ask
got me off the-
Stephen to ask Danny to add to it.
Oh, that's how that works. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dan.
Stephen, go ask Dan.
Okay.
Okay, so I think when it comes to Stephen, it's a whole different way of looking at it. I wouldn't even look at it as pricing. I'd look at it as genius. So look at Stephen DeCoons. How does he price his Hulk at $6 million? And as soon as the Hulk comes out, it's worth 10. So I think that when you have one of the greatest living watchmakers in the world, you're a genius. You're making 100, 105 things a year that are just the most incredible instruments of our modern era of watchmaking. 6,000 hours to go into one timepiece. If it was a modern contemporary artist today that spent 6,000 hours on a cool painting that might have taken them 20 minutes, they may ask 20 million. So I could argue that his watches are art, and $500,000 for his interpretation of art might actually be reasonable. So it's not about how much did the machine cost or how much did the parts cost. It's when it comes to this man, and there's a few others that have been at Dubai Watch Week, it's how much is their art worth? And then what is somebody willing to pay for that art while they're alive? So to me, I look at his art as very reasonable and fair, and maybe even more than fair compared to 60,000 watches that are made, and maybe we talk about a steel watch with a blue dial. So I think that when it comes to yourself, you might actually be reasonable and underpricing.
I like you,
what you're
Danny. You know, I mean, you're a nice guy. Isn't he a nice guy? You know, it's a...
All right. I am actually going to ask a question. Christophe, please ask Adam what he thinks about brands who piggyback on shows put on by other brands.
Adam, very serious question. What do you think of brands that are piggybacking on shows organized by others?
Trade shows.
All right. That's a wonderful question, and I'm so glad you asked that. Honestly, I think it's pretty shabby. You know, people put a lot of time and effort into setting up the shows, whether you agree with the show or not, and the brands that are participating are spending a lot of money to be a part of that show. So I think what we're talking about is somebody, you know, soliciting outside of, you know, Baselworld or Watches and Wonders or any one of these other shows that haven't actually committed. And I think I certainly understand a brand that says, you know what, I want no part of this. You know, we want to do our own thing, but then do your own thing. You know, so that's, you know, kind of where I am on that. So yeah, screw them.
Barbara, could you ask all of the panelists who each panelist would love to talk to as a past master, from George Daniels, Gerald Genta, Mr. Breguet originally when he was alive, and what would they ask them? So who would be the person they would love to have who would be the person they'd love to question, and what would that one question be?
Ooh, very good. Okay, panelists, esteemed guests, what would be the one master watchmaker you would like to have a conversation with? And if you could ask them one question, what would that question be? And you can go, like, if you have your answer, please go.
I'm gonna let the master genius watchmaker, who's actually living today, start with that answer. Because he can relate to the people before him better than I can relate to the people before me.
So you're kicking it to Stephen to start?
To start.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Danny. Thank you. Who would? Yeah, you know, I went to watchmaking school in London, and so I was in this environment. You know, after the British watch industry or the English watch industry had pretty much died, and except for the great late George Daniels, but. I think, you know, for me, a very interesting time was the 17th century, actually, in watchmaking. And I think the person I would really like to talk to would be perhaps Ahasuerus from Antioch, who was a clockmaker who came over with his family from the Low Countries, from the Netherlands. And he designed a very architectural type of clock, and was, I mean, the work is incredible from that time. The complications, they had already a grand sonnery striking clock in the early 1660s. And so I'd, you know, like to go back and ask him, you know, where did he get that inspiration for that design from?
It's very good. Guys? Adam?
You know, it's funny because it's the exact same for me. That's why. Because I mean, it's just, there's so much to dig in there. And, you know, and if I could just be there with him and with you, you know, we could sort of back and forth. It would be a really interesting conversation. So no, I obviously have no idea who that is. But when you go back in time like that, I'm also thinking more along the lines of the clockmakers, and when I think of Harrison and his pursuit of the Longitude Prize, like that's someone that I would have loved to have spoken to. And just more on the thought process behind accepting this challenge, approaching the challenge, and then I think just the frustrations that went part and parcel with the whole thing, and then not even necessarily having it awarded properly at the time, but it was something that really changed, it changed the world. You know, a lot of times you look at timekeeping and our ability to tell time and our ability to do it accurately. Every time we leap forward, there's almost like a leap forward in terms of civilization. And certainly the longitude prize and the clock that resulted from this is something that allowed, sort of opened up the new world, so, in a sense. So yeah, that's the dude I would ask. But then your
Good
guy.
call.
Yeah,
Good call.
Yeah, definitely your guy.
Christoph?
How funny it is, huh? I had the same also.
See, yeah.
It's unreal.
That's why they chose
Yeah.
us.
Very good. I think I will go back to your question, and you mentioned one of these masters, but more from a design perspective. And I would ask Gerald Janta, what was the motivation and the inspiration when he drew back in the 70s two of these models that we all know today? Where did the inspiration come? Did it look at car design? Did it look at building design? Or to come with these shapes that are so much in demand today?
He stole my guy.
You can have mine.
I think I'm going to touch again on Genta because I think a lot of people, he was also a watchmaker. He wasn't just a case designer. He was a watchmaker, right?
I don't know, but I mean, he was certainly behind a lot of interesting watches.
So I look at people don't realize that we celebrate with him the cases that we see today, but we seem to have forgotten the cases that don't bear some of the name, like the Jeffica case, the Mickey Mouse case that he had, that being the first guy to put a Mickey Mouse watch into a pretty cool case. That if some of those designs would be with leading manufacturers today, they might actually be iconic in themselves. But he also made minute repeaters and skeleton minute repeaters. So I would have to say in the modern era, since I'm much more astute in the modern era than I am in the vintage era, I'd have to side with him too.
I'd like Stephen to ask Christoph, how important, or where in the pantheon of great watchmakers would you place Larkham Kendall?
Well, Christoph, I've got a nice easy one for you here. So where in the pantheon of great watchmakers would you place Larkham Kendall?
Well, I can't even pronounce his name, so that's going to be a tough one. Adam, where would you place that gentleman in the pantheon of watchmaking?
I think in the pantheon of watchmaking, that Danny really has an opinion about that, and because I know this because I feel like we talked about this once, maybe like a while ago.
I would have to say he was just fantastic. Absolutely a fantastic watchmaker.
Right up there.
And he enjoyed wine.
Do you want me to help you out a bit, Danny? Because although I asked the question, I guess I can field it out.
Very good.
So quite high up, Larkham Kendall was, he was charged with the task of replicating Harrison's H4 chronometer, so John Harrison's, and built K1 and K2, notably, to demonstrate first off that what John Harrison had spent his whole life doing, something like 40 years, is pretty much his whole life trying to prove that a mechanical timekeeper could be the key to navigation across the oceans and the longitude prize. And so Larkham Kendall was given this very difficult job to actually replicate that and try and make it a more cost-effective solution as well. So he actually tried to take out some of the elements that John Harrison had built into that into that machine. So just to give a little bit of help there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that history lesson.
Christoph, can you please ask Adam what would be the question he would really like to ask Danny?
Adam, what is the one question you really, really would like to ask Danny?
Where to begin? There's so many questions. Right now, though, just looking at you, just where did you get those socks? You're killing it with.
To tell you the truth, my daughter tells me I have no style. So, see, I'm always in my suit, whatever. So she bought me those socks.
All right.
So she could liven me up a little bit.
All right, well, it's working.
Well, that's cleared that
Yeah,
one
it's
up,
working.
hasn't it?
Christoph, if you could ask Danny what his thoughts are on watch media becoming retailers.
Danny, what are your thoughts on watch media? Let me finish the question, please.
Play along, Danny.
As long as you don't change the question. No.
What do you think about media becoming retailer? Watch media becoming retailers?
I think it's great. I think it has to go with one word, authentic. So to me, if a retailer is authentic and honest and gives the consumer education, honesty, transparency, integrity, not being bought by the brands, but by what the customer wants to hear, true advice, then I think it's great. I think if it's strictly for the sale of a product and the promotion of a product, I think that's okay too. And I think the customer will see through that if it's just a commercial. It just depends on how serious of media you want it to be. So at Watchbox, we're looking for it to be as honest, open, transparent. And I think if any of you guys have listened to Tim Masso as an example, his reviews, his interviews, his passion, his knowledge, it's honest. Some of the best watchmakers in the world, it was an honor for me to watch him interview them here at Dubai Week, which is something that's never happened, that a retailer like us would have the opportunity, or somebody like Tim, who is so passionate, would have an opportunity to even meet you, let alone get to interview you. And I think that shows how the family here is so moving forward in their look to taking care of the customer. So if you said to me, let's use Hodinkee as another example, since that comes up. I think Ben is great for this industry. He's hired a lot of great press. I think he writes great stuff. And you know what? So what if he can go to the world and he can be authentic and he can sell product in the right light? I think he's doing the right thing. And I think the brands that stand behind him are doing the right thing, because we know what's going on out there. We know how hard it is for retailers and press to come through. But I think the key in it all is one thing: authenticity, transparency, integrity, honesty, and fun. And even if a retailer doesn't provide that, the customer's going to know.
This actually touches upon a question that you asked for Adam. Adam, I would like you to ask Danny, how many watches from the Watchbox inventory is he going to give you for Christmas?
Give me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is a question I've been meaning to ask him for a while. So Danny, how many watches from Watchbox am I getting for Christmas? I've been a good boy.
I think I'm going to give you the opportunity to sell as many of those watches on the Revolution platform as I'm teasing.
We'll talk.
Yes.
Adam, can you ask Stephen if he can promise us that he will stay away from silicium?
So Stephen, this is a tough one. This is serious. Can you promise us here and now that you will stay far and away from silicium?
Well, it is a technical question, maybe a political one. I could perhaps try and skate around it from that and ask if but I won't. I'll take it. We'll take it. No, very interesting question. You know, watchmaking is an extraordinary thing. It's a unique mixture of art, science, mechanics, and as the late George Daniels said, that's quite a lot of things to put in such a small space. But along that, through history, and we had a panel the other day where we touched a little bit on this, and technology, and how do you balance it up? You know, there's a fine line there. But silicon as a material is, of course, has a lot of interesting things, and it's something we look at. But you know, when we come to a particular material, it's got to bring something to the party. You know, it's got to bring something real benefit in terms of how we think about watchmaking for what we do. So, you know, those parameters and criteria are not the same as they will be for another brand who perhaps does bigger volume and wants to be more accessible. So, you know, for what we do, a new material, we've got to be able to bring craftsmanship to it. Hand finishing, silicon is extremely tricky to work with for that sort of thing. So it could well be a long while before you might imagine seeing silicon in a Global 4C, except for the case gaskets.
I would like you to ask Stephen Forsey when he's going to be involved in your next horological machine.
Oh, great. And thank you for doing the other concept. Very good.
Okay, this was not planned. Stephen, when are we going to work together?
Max. Well, I guess it's not even any use trying to hot potato that one, really, is it? It's a good question. Huh? Perhaps we should have a chat afterwards, and you know.
Free for coffee?
Coffee it is. Only coffee. It's gonna be 6 p.m. soon, you know.
Done.
Okay.
Thank you, Carlos.
I got two questions. One of them is easy, and it's Adam. I'd like you to ask Mr. Forsey what his views on the Edmund Beck and Dennison triple-legged gravity escapement are. And the other question I would like Christoph to ask Danny, and this is the hard one, is what is the toughest second-hand watch to shift and why?
Can we switch these?
Maybe you could hot potato it to the guy outside my hotel room or something like this, and then kind of send it to the guy at the airport who'll kind of mail it to the guy in Singapore and forget about it. But in the meantime, no.
Fair enough. Stephen, what do you think about what he said? Thank you, Nick.
Well, well, thank you very much to the esteemed Mr. Fulks for fielding another historical question. I wasn't quite anticipating we'd be going there. Interestingly, Edmund Beckett Dennison later became Lord Grimthorpe, and yeah, it's you know, we've got it. Don't worry. And curiously enough, I was born in a city called St Albans, just outside London, where Lord Grimthorpe had his house called Batchwood Hall. And so there are a number of his tremendously wonderful three-legged gravity escapement clocks about, notably the Great Tower of Westminster, which is often called after its curious-sounding bell, Big Ben, which is only the bell, so we can put that one straight. The rest of it, the clock is just the great clock of, it's the Great Tower of Westminster, and it's the clock. So it's got a three-legged gravity escapement. For those of you who are wondering what the hell we're talking about, it's nothing to do with cocktails, you know, where like cocktails are like legs where one isn't enough and three are too many. It's nothing to do with that. It's it's actually.
I would just like to say at the end of this form, he gets an A.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, this is like Jeopardy. Does anybody have another one?
So the three-legged gravity escapement uses it's got three arms to a kind of escape wheel, and what it does is it lifts two arms slightly using the gear train, and then when it releases the next time, the arm moving back thanks to gravity actually is what gives the impulse to the pendulum. So it's an incredibly reliable one, and all nip out there and Google it and have an enjoyment of it. It's a very, very fascinating mechanism to watch, and there's an English clockmaker called Robert Bray who has made clocks with that in recent years. He took it on from Sinclair Harding, another English clockmaker. So you should all nip out there and get one on your desk.
Christoph, do you remember the question that you're
For
supposed
the
to
record, I knew that. All right.
It was the Christophs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick, if you could just refresh my mind and ask the question again.
It's the difficult part of the question. It was really to ask Danny Govberg and to get him to answer honestly, which is the most difficult second-hand watch to shift and why?
So, Danny, what is the most difficult second-hand watch brand to shift?
Okay. What does he mean, shift? Oh, sell. Sorry, sorry.
And why? And why? Yeah.
There's really, for us, there's really no difficult brand. I think the better question would be which ones hold their value better. But to me, a watch has a value. So certain watches may bring way over the value, and certain watches bring a lesser value. But there's really none that are difficult to sell as long as we're selling them at the value that a consumer will pay. So I think what I'd like to see happen, to answer the question, is I would like to see our industry start to celebrate the classics more. I think that where pre-owned could step into the game is, instead of what's difficult to sell, I would say what are some watches that should be being bought. The IWC Da Vinci, the original one, the Jefficas with Mickey Mouse, the Frank Muellers, the Roger Dubuis rectangulars that changed the industry. Just think back on how many of these great watches changed our entire industry in the last 25 years, and now they're like a little forgotten in how reasonable they are. But as far as secondhand goes, what's beautiful about it is a watch that retailed for $25,000 may be worth $2,500. And then there's some watches that retail for $25,000 that today are worth $100,000. So none of them are difficult to sell as long as we're just selling them at the price that's fair to the consumer.
Okay, I just want to say, I'm so sorry, guys. We have just under or over 7 minutes left. We won't have time for Q&A. I just want to let everybody know that. So,
we've overrun a bit.
I see what you did there.
no,
Yeah.
no. Who's up? Miguel.
I'm asking you to ask Stephen, being him a watch insider, watchmaker, knowing the industry inside and out, what is the biggest fraud or misconception, myth, or misleading concept that he's seen in watchmaking?
Okay.
And also, the global Forsay partnership, who's Lennon, who's McCartney, because we know that Sylvain has the Ringo Starr haircut.
You're a longtime watchmaker. What are some of the greatest myths or misconceptions you've seen?
Well, one of the classics is obviously the client who comes in with their watch to have it repaired, and they say they've overwound it. It's overwound, and because you can't overwind a watch. I mean, if you've got a manual wound watch and you keep on, trying to wind it, you'll break something. So, so perhaps when you take your watch in, if it's not working, you broke it. How's that?
That's simple. Okay. It's a big myth. Questions?
Adam,
Sir?
Could you ask Danny which watch he would like to present to Barbara for hosting this last panel on this extremely nice Dubai Watch Week from the collection he has here and his newly opened shop here in Dubai? I can't make it shorter than that.
So Danny, obviously Barbara's done a bang-up job here and clearly deserves some type of a reward. And you are uniquely positioned to provide this award. So out of the timepieces available to you through Watchbox here in New York or whatever, so just what's she getting for this? Like,
I got the perfect watch for Barbara.
Yeah, what's the perfect watch?
And when I walked into my hotel room here, the Siddiquis were kind enough to give me the most beautiful chocolate wristwatch that I was going to save and take home as a memory of Dubai Week. And
Have you taken that to Watchbox to flip it?
I'm actually,
That's terrible.
And by the way,
terrible.
I was ready to post
Can you
that.
believe it?
I was ready to post that watch on Watchbox, and it would have come with a priceless price tag. But I am
Not
willing
many are
in
gonna
this case to
survive.
give my watch to Barbara for holiday in case she didn't get one, or a significant other or her daughter or son would like to have that watch as well.
Danny, that is so nice. Thank you so much. But unfortunately, I'm a legitimate editorial journalist, and I don't accept watches.
Oh.
Nice.
I would like for Adam to look Stephen directly into the eyes, into his soul, and ask him who his least favorite watchmaker of all time is.
Oh, wow.
Sorry for the controversy. I just thought it would be nice to end it this way.
All right.
Lean in, guys.
We have to get in the zone here.
Yeah. All right. This is feeling something.
In fact, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it in your head. Can I do that? Can I?
Okay. No, not.
Okay.
So no, this is a completely. This is a total softball question. Yeah, who's the watchmaker that you detest the most?
I think it's the one that Christoph would like.
Oh boy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
My pleasure.
Yeah, as Barbara said, and when she introduced me, I'm an executive, so I'm not a watchmaker, I'm not a designer, so I might take a chance to keep the hot potato on that seat. I think, to answer your question, nobody can be detested or downgraded as long as you're putting your best foot forward and you're trying to be creative.
Here we go.
No, but as long as you put creativity and you're working to create something, then the rest is judgment. It's hard to please everyone, certainly. And you can do things that people don't like, and you can do things people like. And we said earlier, and Stephen and Danny said it very well, I mean, we're not just creating a function to tell time. It's art. And art can touch everybody in different ways. So if we go back and assume that then a watchmaker is an artist, even if you don't like his job, there is no reason why he should be detested.
I said he was kind. I said it at the beginning. All right, there is time for one more. Jason.
Christoph, I'd like you to ask the rest of the panel, if they've had to justify a watch purchase to their significant other, what's the biggest fib they've had to say?
That's a good one.
So I ask the whole panel or anyone in particular in the panel?
The whole panel.
So the whole panel. So, since you're next to me, Adam.
What's the question?
He's going to say it. Listen.
No, but I lost it.
Oh my God. If you, what is the lie that you tell when you have to justify buying a watch to your husband, wife?
Okay, what's your story when you have to justify that you again spent a good amount of money into a new watch?
I just tell her it's my job. There's a certain image I have to project, and I won't be taken seriously. Hence, I really needed that IWC perpetual calendar. The real question is, does it work? And in my case, no. It's never worked. It's not one.
I don't really have to justify, because my wife has a lot more watches than I do. So it seems like for every time I get one, she gets three. So usually, she's happy when I get one.
That's good. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Stephen.
What a
Les?
novel.
Well,
ending with you.
Well, if we're quite honest, the thing was I didn't really have the budget I needed to buy the watches I wanted. So with Robert, we've been very lucky to be able to make the watches that we wanted. So that's kind of easier then. I don't have to kind of explain it to my wife. The thing I have to explain is why I'm having such a nice time with you guys. That's much more.
There you go. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, that is it. That's our panel. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Siddiqui family.